last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're out here starting in sunny Southern California, and this signal is sent out by God almost everywhere. Now, back in the day, Bill Skywatcher back in New York grabbed that signal, but our producer these days is Chanel down in Utah. That's Chanel numero uno, number one. And I got to tell you, gang, she has done one bang-up job in producing this show. So, Chanel, I just wanted to give you a shout out and tell you what a great job I think you're doing. And I want to thank you ahead of time. Now, tonight, we're going to have a show that's been a long time coming. Going back a couple of months ago, you may recall that weird tropical storm that hit out here on the West Coast. On that particular date, my guest then was the same fella, Mr. Don Schmitt. We were planning on having a bang-up show that evening, and I lost power. And where I live, my cell phone, I can't even get a signal here. So what that means is if I use my cell phone, it's got to be on the Wi-Fi. Well, unfortunately, my Wi-Fi is also connected up to my electricity. Couldn't use it, so I had to literally get in the car and drive down the hill to let Chanel know we were out of power. Well, so we rescheduled Don a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately, he was having some severe computer problems, so we had to cancel it again. It was a freaking nightmare, but I said, well, we'll get you back real quick. He got everything squared away, and he's going to be our guest tonight. And, of course, Gary Cassell, Mark Center are both joining me. They're the crew here in studio. And with that, Chanel, would you please bring everybody on board? There we go. Don, oh, my God. It's great to see you, pal.
I can't help but wonder what Don Ecker looks like when he loses power.
Yes.
I have to say, I love it that you used Richard Burton doing
right? Isn't that great?
Yeah, exactly. And if you've ever seen even the actual production, and it's just glorious. The only other people that were smart enough to do that, when I gave a talk in Manchester, England, and as I came out onto the stage, that was the intro. And talk about just setting, the perfect mood for the evening. So thank you, whoever did that, Don. So that's
yeah.
Great.
Well, that's the folks back in New York that did that. But hey, look, I got to tell you, Don. We got a Don and a Don and a Jagari and a Mark. Okay, Don, I feel underdressed. I mean, buddy, look. I thought I was doing great things today when I washed my face, I combed my hair, and I shaved. And here you are in a tie and a shirt. I don't know, guys. Should we change the dress code?
No, let's just not have Don on again.
No, it's bad enough they're trying to do it as far as on the House of Representatives that they're going to eliminate the dress code. So
Yes.
it just continues to show that that's the direction they want to take this. I harken
That's
back
only
to
because of that rutabaga that somehow slipped in there with his freaking hoodie and his. I mean, Jesus.
unbelievable.
Excuse
I know.
me. I'm sorry. I'm getting,
You know.
getting a little political here. I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe my eyes.
You know,
Hey, but
my
Go
late
ahead.
scientific director, J. Allen Hynek. I mean, I was blessed that I worked with him the last 8 years of his life. But he always schooled us. He always referred to us as his boys. There was a handful of us that, spent weeks with him at a time, just always under his tutelage and his counsel. But he'd always tell us, boys, we walk on eggshells. So first impression. And so Hynek was always one that you would always see in a suit, in a sport coat, and a tie, no matter what he was doing.
well,
So I think
it's
it's
funny. It's funny you would bring him up. I got something I want to ask you about J. Allen Hynek. First off, did you read my disclosure paper?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
And I think it's
excellent.
spot on. I think you hit on a number of points that the rookies, the real know-nothings in the field presently, they would never even consider because they don't know the history. And you put it all back in perspective and you retrace the history of where this all goes back to. And then why?
Well, the reason I ask that, and believe it or not, it wasn't to plug my paper. The reason I ask you is because all over that document
Mhm.
are the footprints of American intelligence
Yes.
operations. Okay. Footprints all through it, all over it. Most people may think, oh yeah, the government this, the government that, but no, they've been shepherding this since the beginning. Now, with that being said, Don, back in 1994, in June, okay, on my original radio show, which was UFOs Tonight, you probably may recall that.
Dwight Schultz. Yeah.
Okay. I had on one evening a guy that today, if he's even thought of at all, is a pariah.
Mm-hmm.
That was William Moore,
Mm-hmm.
Bill Moore. Okay.
Moore.
The guy
Bill
that wrote
Moore.
the first freaking book about Roswell.
Yeah. Roswell
Now-
incident with Charles Berlitz. Right.
Now, with that out there, okay, he was one of the, I guess you could say, if you consider the researchers back then, the prominent researchers, he was one of the superstars
Yes.
until July of 1989. Now,
Right.
from now until the day I shed this mortal coil, I will never understand, and believe me, I have thought about it for years. I will never understand his intentionally shooting himself in the foot in an admission before a huge MUFON crowd at the MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas,
Las Vegas. Correct.
that he worked hand in glove with disinformation specialist in the government.
Yes.
No other way to put it. And they disinformed a civilian scientist researcher by the name of Paul Benowitz.
Right.
Okay. And it caused this man ultimately to be placed into a mental institution. Now, okay. So that was huge. If you were there, ladies and
I was
gentlemen,
there.
you would not believe the turmoil that caused. And there was a lot of other things that happened there too. And some of it included me. But I had Moore come on my program in June of 94, and we were talking about a lot of this stuff. And incidentally, it was the very last time from that day to this one that I ever spoke to the man.
Mm-hmm.
But during that show, we were talking about government intrusion into UFO research. We were talking about his, and of course, he did everything he could do to whitewash himself. But Don, he made a statement, and I challenged him on it immediately. He made a statement that up until J. Allen Hynek's death, he and Jacques Vallée were, still working with the United States Air Force, taking orders from them. In other words, he basically said they, in effect, they were two moles, Vallée and Hynek. Okay.
Right.
Now, what they may or may not have been talking about, if in fact they were, I have no idea. But with that being said, you work closely with Hynek. What is your take on that? Do you think Hynek was still following the Air Force's tune?
And we both would remember that who I consider even more relevant within the scope of UFO history would be the late Dr. James McDonald. I often think that if McDonald would have lived where we may be today, because he was our champion as far as not only advocating disclosure, but the idea that if anyone was going to unravel and solve this mystery, we had to do it from within. We couldn't rely on the government. We couldn't trust the government. And he was a prime example of that. During the congressional hearings in 66, 68, the beginnings of the hearings, and what they did to him alone in Washington.
Right.
And part of the fact that he eventually, in committing suicide, we don't know how much of an impact, what effect that all had on him, because he was being discredited by the very government, by the very country that he loved, that he worked for. But Hynek was in the same boat. And we know the story that when McDonald approached Hynek at Northwestern, when Hynek was the head of the astronomy department there, and McDonald, pounding his fist on Hynek's desk, why aren't you sharing the data with your colleagues? You are betraying the science. You need to be exchanging information with us, whereas you are obligated to the government. You're working for the government, and you need to at least allow us to investigate this subject on our own. And Hynek kept talking about how he had a security clearance. He was under oath, which we knew. And McDonald would ask him then, why are you cooperating with them? Why are you even working with the dark side, so to speak?
$5,000 a year.
Yeah. It was a pittance. It was nothing. It was not. But Hynek's excuse was that I need to be there if they ever decide to take me in to their confidence. In other words, I want to be there. I want to have access to the data. Now, we know the long story for the 20 years that Hynek consulted with Blue Book, that he, served essentially as their pawn. He was their spokesperson. They would always trot him out after the fact to come up with an explanation to debunk the report. He was used in that regard because he was their scientific consultant. And he became a bit of a maverick, a bit of a renegade, because as he slowly made that turn, and we all know the story, and it was specifically cases like Socorro, New Mexico in April of 64, that Hynek realized we were dealing with a physical nuts and bolts phenomenon. something that was interacting with the environment, something interacting with the witnesses, and he just could not call all these people liars any longer. He realized that there was a hardcore, to the phenomenon, but he was not having access. They were not sharing it with him. And so he threatened to leave Blue Book on numerous occasions. And they would always, reel him back in. Well, you're under contract. And we promise we're going to do this. We're going to do that for you. And they would dangle the carrot. They would offer him a few tidbits here and there. But unlike the TV series, Project Blue Book, which suggested that Hynek was actually out in the field investigating, they prevented Hynek from having access, from being out in the field. He was not investigating Blue Book cases. He was strictly used to come up with alternative explanations, used to always pacify the media in thinking, well, it's something astronomical, it's something meteorological.
So he was only exposed to the data and not a field guy at all.
That's right.
Well, the question I have is, did he ever express a rebuke or regret over being so compliant with the
Many times. When Hynek was introduced at the first congressional hearings in 1966, he was glowingly praised and supported by his then congressional representative, but none other than Donald Rumsfeld, who would go on to become the first time of two, Secretary of Defense, first time under Gerald Ford, second time under George W. Bush. Okay, so Hynek happened to be in Washington during that first congressional Secretary of Defense assignment. And so he sets up an appointment with Rumsfeld. They meet in his office in Washington. And Hynek explains to him, I've given you 20 years of my life. I was consultant to Project Blue Book. I feel I deserve some answers. I feel I've earned to be taken in as far as some honesty of what I was what I was consulting on. And Hynek would tell us that Rumsfeld got up from behind his desk, walked over, leaned over Hynek, pointed his finger in his face, and said, "You have no need to know." Okay? So then we go a few years into this. Now, Hynek left documents clearly demonstrating that post-Project Blue Book, he stayed on with the Air Force. So you are correct, Don. He did stay on. In fact, he worked under Colonel George Weinbrenner at Foreign Technology Division, FTD, at Wright-Patterson. And what's really, intriguing about Wright-Pat and foreign technology specifically is that's where the remnants, that's where the wreckage, that's where the bodies went from Roswell in 1947. So it was clear that they were keeping Hynek on a short leash. They were afraid that, once again, turned loose and actually able to investigate these cases on his own, that he may stumble upon something that they couldn't reel back, that they couldn't contain. So Hynek saved us the documents, even the job description. His job description with foreign technology from 1970 through the fall of 1973 was consultant on controversial aerial phenomenon. I've had colleagues argue with me that has nothing to do with UFOs. I honestly have. Consultant on controversial aerial phenomenon. So they try to always rationalize, the idea that, well, it was something else. No. It was UFOs.
It kind of sounded to me like the public stance of Hynek, they just wanted another class as far as what he could say in public and what they wanted him to do in public.
Yes.
He was just another class.
That's right. But it didn't work out that way.
Right.
Because he turned 180. He became, an advocate. He believed that something was truly going on. He believed we were dealing with a nuts and bolts phenomenon. And he truly accepted that we were dealing with a phenomena or properties of a phenomenon that needed to be investigated. The Air Force had just washed their hands of it with the Condon Committee. They shut down Project Blue Book, but in reality, the project continues. Foreign Technology Division. Hynek remains on as the consultant, and both his private secretary, Jenny Zeidman, who worked at Battelle Institute in Columbus, Ohio, and Colonel Bob Friend. And Friend told me the exact same story. Bob Friend was the second last director of Project Blue Book before Hector Quintanilla. Okay? And I had dinner. I don't know if you ever met him, Don, but he lived out in L.A.
I have a question about that. Bob Friend, sure.
Yeah.
And how deep?
But let me finish, because both Jenny Zeidman and Bob Friend were witness in October of 73. Okay? October 73. Hynek storming out of Colonel George Weinbrenner's office at Wright Pat at Foreign Technology Division, yelling, "Patsies, patsies, they're trying to make us patsies all over again." And Zeidman drove Hynek all the way back to Chicago from Dayton, Ohio. He was fuming. He wouldn't say a word all the way back. And he gets back home, and he gets right on the phone with Sherman Larson, who was with NICAP, which was the Donald Keyhole group.
Yeah.
And he says, "You know how we've been talking about starting up our own group? Let's get together tomorrow and let's talk about it." And that was the beginning of the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS. So
I was going to ask you, how deep do you think Bob Friend was in on the know, Don?
Well, we both remember that Bob Friend was constantly pushing for outside investigation.
Right.
He felt that the Air Force, or at least Blue Book, was sorely limited, sorely understaffed, sorely underfunded.
Well, we know why.
Exactly, because the real investigation, as General Arthur Exxon, who at the time in 64 was base commander at Wright Pat, described that when Blue Book, their two little investigators would go flying off in a single engine plane in one direction, the actual investigation, 10 to 15 officers from the Pentagon would fly off in a chartered jet in the opposite direction, and their reports all went directly to the Pentagon, not Wright Pat. So we know there was as Hynek even would tell us, the hardcore cases were all going directly to Washington, had nothing to do with Blue Book. So another example where Hynek was not inside the inner loop. He was not part of the club, so to speak.
But those guys in Blue Book were also out of the fold, weren't they?
Totally. It was.
They had to know. They had to know that.
They did, and Hynek knew it. That's why he even made that comment to Dr. James McDonald. But I want to have access, that if they ever do decide to take me in, I want to be there. And they never did. In fact, I did a paper at the UFO Congress some years ago entitled, "Did Gerald and Hynek Know the Truth?" And I was able to document, and I pretty well was able to demonstrate that up until the very end, they never did confide. They never did take him in. In fact, even after when he was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he had the tumor removed at the Moffitt Clinic, just up the road from Udon, up in San Francisco. And he was in the recovery room. And it was our chief investigator at that time, Alan Hendry, who witnessed Hynek tossing and turning in the bed, going, "Why can't they tell me now? Why can't they even tell me now? And
well, Don, when you have the bigot list that apparently somebody has, okay, even the freaking president of the United States is not in the know.
Right.
Not that the rutabaga we've got now, it would make a difference one way or the other. But I go back to the 90s, the mid 90s with Bill Clinton. Okay.
Bill Clinton, right.
Yeah, he tried to get his assistant AG, Webb Hubbell, to find two things. Who actually assassinated John Kennedy, and what's the story behind UFOs?
Correct.
And the president couldn't get the answer.
Right. And that's why in your paper, you come up with the perfect explanation. And as it's called, the core story. The idea that why are you asking me about something that we will not even acknowledge exists? It shoots down all inquiry. It shoots down all transparency. There's nothing to, it's like the old, Frank Drebin, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. So in other words, there's nothing to brief you on, Mr. President, if it doesn't exist. And it shuts it all down. It doesn't go any further.
So with the current UAP, you brought up an interesting analogy. With the current UAP situation, I would assume that all of these people going up in front of Congress and all that, they're no different than Project Blue Book then. Right? They don't know anything more. They know stories. That's about it. And then they go up there and keep us all amused.
That's the whole point about intelligence. And as we are all observing, who is essentially running everything right now, including the presidency, the Oval Office? It's intelligence. It's the CIA. It's the FBI. I mean, they can intimidate you to the point that you don't say a word, or if you so much as decide you're going to be a whistleblower like Edward Snowden, whether you believe he's a hero or a traitor. Who would have envisioned 20 years ago that you'd have to flee to Russia, of all places, for protection, for asylum? And that's what happened with Snowden. Erich Steinhoff was with Paperclip. Paperclip was the German Nazi scientists that were brought over here, kept in El Paso at Fort Bliss, post-World War II. And Steinhoff was a witness to Roswell. They brought them in. He was second to Werner von Braun as far as with the Nazi rocket program. Okay? And they risked bringing a number of Paperclip people into Roswell to examine the wreckage. They wanted their impressions. They wanted to have them say, it's not German. It's not our technology. They were, again, it was another example of how they were searching for answers. They were seeking every and all opinion as to what they were dealing with at that time. And Steinhoff always would tell his sons, who we also interviewed, and he would say, those who know never talk, and those who know nothing always talk. And I think that sums up what we're seeing, what we've observed in Washington in the last couple months. The fact that the people that are talking, the fact that the best we can come up with is as a whistleblower is a second, third-hand witness. First of all, that's not the definition of a whistleblower. He can't prove anything. David Grush cannot prove anything. And yet that's the best. Because do they really want the answer? I mean, we've been in contact with Congressman Tim Burchett's office. We've been in contact with Congressman Glenn Grothman's office, who's also on the committee. Do you want the truth or don't you? Who is telling you who to talk to? Because you're not listening to anyone in the UFO community who will steer you and tell you exactly who you should speak with.
Well, you know, if I had any damn thing to say about it, and I'm talking about from a congressional standpoint, I would subpoena retired Rear Admiral Thomas Wilson and civilian scientist Eric Davis I would have that document laying right there in a closed session, and then I would grill Wilson. Now, Wilson, by the fact that apparently he was told this core secret was protected by a special access program, would have no choice but to lie.
Right.
But
perjure himself. He'd have to perjure himself. Right.
But Eric Davis is a different story.
Mm-hmm.
And that little weasel, yeah, I said it, weasel, has made himself unavailable ever since. He's hiding out.
He's hiding out. In fact, what I'm amused by, gentlemen, is that Eric Davis is listed as a scientific consultant to the Mutual UFO Network, and they can never reach him. Whether it's the current, as far as David McDonald, as far as the current director, or the previous one, they could never reach Davis. So much for his being available as a scientific consultant. So why is he hiding?
And somebody else that might be interesting to get in a closed session under oath would be Robert Bigelow.
Of course. And Don, I think we could honestly say we both knew Bigelow when he was just a multimillionaire. And he has made and funded UFO projects and surveys.
Well, he dangled it to MUFON and QFOS and who else for a while, but then he withdrew his money because they wouldn't dance to Robert Bigelow's tune.
That's right. In fact, there was a coalition between QFOS and the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, and the Fund for UFO Research in Washington, FUFOR, where Bigelow at the time was promising $1 million special project funding if they would essentially, cooperate with him, provide him with data, provide him with their case reports on a regular basis. And Bigelow wanted to have a vote between the groups. And they felt that he was asking too much, that they were essentially selling their souls, that they would turn over information to Bigelow not knowing where it was going. I mean, it was no different, gentlemen, than when we worked with the late Congressman Stephen Schiff of New Mexico. And we were asked by his aide at that time, Mary Martinek, to provide all of our data, provide the names and contact information of all of our first 10 Roswell witnesses. And then we quickly learned, before we fell for the trap, we learned who Mary Martinek was married to. Well, he was married to the late Carl Flock, who worked for the CIA. Mm-hmm. And then when we met with the congressman and we learned from him personally that none of the material was reaching his desk. It was all going through Mary Martinek directly to Carl Flock. And then are we to assume it was going to the CIA? So you learn the hard way. You can't trust any of these people.
Well, he was not only CIA, but he had also been an undersecretary of defense.
Donald Rumsfeld again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was also Rumsfeld. So the circle, it just gets bigger, but it's the same cadre of individuals who, as you've been saying, Don, they withhold the information from the very president of the United States. And it makes them feel as though they are in control, that they are in many ways running the country. And as we were just discussing it a few moments ago, the fact that now the FBI would like to paint targets on American citizens' backs. That if you just vote a certain way, you become classified, categorized as
well,
a
not
terrorist.
only the FBI, but the IRS. I mean, they just hugely expanded the IRS.
And bought up a lot of weapons for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and gazillion rounds of ammunition. My God, well, in my document, I said, here in the 21st century, you are seeing a police state at work. Okay. Now, I don't want to get off in the weeds with this political business, but the fact of the matter is, you can't discuss this topic without politics surrounding it.
Absolutely. 100%. And for those who say you can, again, they're sweeping it under the carpet. They're showing their allegiance, the fact that they don't want to rock the boat. They want to make sure that when the accusers start lining us up, that they can say, well, I was on the right side. I was trying to play nice, hoping that you would treat me nice when the time was appropriate. And
well, you'd eat me last is basically it, Don.
Yeah.
You'd eat me last. You'd get everybody else first, and I'd be last.
Hey, Don Schmitt, the guy with the tie on. And I'm not saying you have a tie on, and I think you know what I mean.
Yes.
So what's your view of this? So we have Bigelow, and he's on the ranch, and he does a whole bunch of stuff, and then he never releases basically anything except a reporter's book that has no evidence in it at all. And he didn't release it, but he allowed that to be released, I'm sure. So he's got all this information, and then they sell this thing to somebody else, evidently without some kind of a release of, by the way, if you have people come on here, their heads could swell up and weird things could be happening to them. And yet the new owner says, well, we want to make it into a Disneyland, basically, with all of this radiation and holes that are sucking things up. So as far as Bigelow goes, what exactly is going on there with all that information? Is he just bought off and we're never going to see it?
Well, and then when you consider that when Lou Elizondo, when you talk about ATIP and that project, and that it was the late Senator Harry Reid, and how Congress had allocated $22 million that supposedly was to go towards UAP investigation research. And then you learn afterward that it went to Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
$22 million. Can you imagine what any one of us could have done? Can you imagine what we could do with Roswell in 1 year's time with that, when all the principal witnesses were still alive? 22. Yeah. And then a report, just a report. Again, I'm sorry, there's a disconnect. And then when you also consider that it was even the Department of DOD that was suggesting that it was Bigelow Aerospace that actually had a facility that had had artifacts, that they had physical evidence that they were analyzing and testing. And what happens during COVID, but Bigelow Aerospace lays off that whole department. 60-some people are laid off, and there's no chance they're going to be called back. And there's Bigelow, who has remained in the shadows ever since. Now, we saw Bigelow when he was on 60 Minutes. And we're all going, yeah, because he's saying it point blank. He's right in the reporter's face that, well, you smirk, you laugh at this. Well, you have no idea. You have no idea what's actually going on. And then that this all happens subsequently, and then where the one person who could step up and the one person who could buy the truth if he desired, and it's like, I can't believe he's been bought off, because he certainly doesn't need the money. So does he become part of the proverbial noise that is threatened off to the point? Well, Bigelow, we all know Bigelow lost his son. His son committed suicide very young. And I can only imagine certain people saying, well, if you want to believe it was suicide, go right ahead. or we can make things look like suicide, very conveniently. And how would you like it to be another member of your family? How would you like it to be you, Bob? And we go back to 1947, what they were doing to the Roswell witnesses. And one of the things that they were specifically doing, and I think we're, at least the three of us are old enough, that what was the one thing that people dreaded above the IRS and above, even the government back then? Well, that they would place you in an asylum where they were doing lobotomies and where they were doing as far as electric shock treatment, and where they were messing you up to the point that you were not even existing. You were a vegetable. That placed terror in people's minds back then. And that's what they were doing to the Roswell witnesses. They were threatening to put them in asylums if they didn't cooperate. So was there an equivalence? Was there something that they threatened Bigelow with to as far as gain his cooperation?
There must have been something, because he's evidently got a warehouse full of information and we ain't going to see it.
And what a crime. But again, he's got all the money in the world. Leave the damn country and then do it from outside.
Well, this all depends upon what that core secret is.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, over the years, when my wife and I were doing UFO Magazine, we talked between us to thousands of people, from the DOD to NASA to God knows who. And probably because there's no doubt in my former military mind, for a while, we were under surveillance. I know we were. I saw them. As a matter of fact, one morning in front of our house, this van that had been periodically parked there for weeks on end would be there, then it would be gone. Later, it would be back. And they had to be trying to telegraph something to us. It's not, Christ, I was a cop, okay? Mm-hmm. It's not like I'm not going to witness or see something like that and not understand what it was. I decided to take them out some coffee. So I got a couple of cups and I got my coffee pot and I walked. It was in the morning. I walked out there and they saw me coming out. They fired up the van and took off. But, this is, well, I don't want to get crude, but this is puppy shit kind of stuff. Okay. Now, with that being said, Don, this secret, I thought about it for years. And I've had all kinds of stories. All those people we talked to, I've had people say, "Oh, well, I think they might have found human bodies on board the craft."
I know, yeah.
Or mutilated, blah blah, all this kind of stuff.
Boxes of human body parts.
Yeah. And finally, it hit me, and it was when I was thinking about writing this position paper. What the hell could it be that they would try to keep secret at all cost, but that there's some kind of a war going on out there? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Look, if there's one group coming here, there's more than one. Mm-hmm. I mean, over the years, Don, you and I, we've been in this a long time. We've seen reports, we've heard testimony, all kinds of things have been seen in the sky. When I was in Vietnam, and honest to God, I didn't know this until I was at my father's funeral. I was out west then when he died. He died in 86, and he was only a young man. He was only 59 when he died. Yeah. Okay, and I'm at the funeral. And a lot of people knew, where my interests were. And I heard a story from my sister that, quite frankly, I found almost impossible to believe. But this is about 71, all right. my dad was outside. He had a riding mower, and we had a big piece of property, and he was cutting the grass. This probably was June or July. And suddenly he stopped this riding mower, jumped off, ran to the back door, screaming at my mother to get out here, get out here, get out here. And flying above the house, this is what I was told. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. But I was told there was a refrigerator-looking thing flying around that had antennas coming out the side of it. And then it took off. Now, okay, I haven't heard, I have heard a few stories that resembled that, but whatever. So yeah, if there's one group here, there's more than one. And who says they get along? In your opinion, would that be the reason they might want to keep this so ultra top secret?
Well, it certainly would be the ultimate reason. It would be something that, are we just the background? Are they here in spite of us? Is it that we are the prize possession? I mean, it's something that we're being fought over, or is it just that we're not in the crosshairs as much as things are being manipulated, things are being staged, a lot of false flag situations going on right now, and it has nothing to do with the human conscience. It's something else. It's something that we're being played like this galactic pawn. And as a result, how do you disclose that? See, for me, for years, I used to simplify it, that it was a cover-up of ignorance, that we couldn't bridge the technology, that it was supernatural. And then, but then when we hear that, at least that I hear, there's a growing faction of the Pentagon that is scared to death of this subject, that they believe we're dealing with something evil, that we're dealing with something even demonic.
Yeah.
And that would be on that same plane. The idea that we're dealing with forces that are just beyond our grasp. And how do you disclose that? How do we have that wonderful scene, and you were at our premiere at the Directors Guild in Hollywood of our Roswell movie.
Yep.
And there's that wonderful scene in the movie where they're roundtabling. It's almost like it's the beginning of the oversight committee. And the general was sitting there with the Secretary of War, James Forrestal, and other, as far as cabinet members from the White House, other military officers. And the general says, my God, what if the people were to learn that we're no longer in control of the skies? And the actor playing Forrestal very stoically just sits there and he nods his head and he goes, they'd be right. That would be, the admission. They'd have to acknowledge that we're no longer in control of things. But vote for me come next election. I'm sorry. They're in a.
Well, let me throw another little thing at you. Back in about 1977, I used to haunt a lot of bookstores. And when I was in college, my major was history. I've been a huge history geek, my entire life. And I found a book. Ancient history has always been at the top of my list. I found a book written by a guy I'd never heard of, but the book was interesting. It was titled The 12th Planet. And the author was a man by the name of Zecharia Sitchin.
Yes, Zecharia Sitchin. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I ended up buying that book, took it home. It was a very dense read. Mm-hmm. I, of course, had been very well aware of the Sumerian culture going back 6,000 years. I never believed, even in school, when they said it was the world's first civilization. Never believed that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
But the book discussed many ideas that just resonated with me. That once upon a time, over 400,000 years ago, a race of beings came down here in search of precious earth metals, primarily gold. Now, with that being said, before I go any further, archaeologists have uncovered ancient gold mines in South America going back over 300,000 years ago. Okay, human beings, okay, back in those days, they didn't know money or anything like that, but they were interested in metals, what they could make tools and what have you out of them.
Of course.
But gold is too soft, okay? Gold is not good for anything like that, like weapons or tools or whatever. So who in the hell would have been mining gold 300,000 years ago? Well, Sitchin had the answer, at least if you believe his research. These beings that they called the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, credited those beings with almost everything. They taught them the arts of civilization. They taught them agriculture, animal husbandry, government, kingship, okay? Mathematics. I mean, my God, stuff that the Sumerians came up with 6,000 years ago, we still use today. All right? And these other things. So what did they ultimately want? Well, they were looking for metals to protect their planet, Nibiru, okay, which is on a 3,600-year cycle through the solar system. And bottom line is, when they came down here, according to Sitchin, and he wrote a whole series of books on this, backed up, okay, it's collectively known as the Earth Chronicles, they brought their politics down here, which resulted in wars by human beings fighting against other human beings under separate godheads. And here's the scary part, Don. Looking at it from today's climate right now, I don't know if the audience out there, I'm sure everybody's heard about the conflict now happening in the Middle East. My absolute terror and fear is that ultimately it could go nuclear. If it does, boy, all bets are off. But apparently 5, 6, 7, 8,000 years ago, it went nuclear then.
Yes.
There are areas in the Middle East that clearly display the impact site of atomic weapons. Not only there, but also in India. All right? Somebody had nukes a long time ago. It wasn't probably us. It was these other guys.
And it may have extended beyond even the Earth. It may have also been on other planets, such as Mars, like Dr. John Brandenburg.
Brandenburg, yeah, he laid that out real clearly. I know John very well. We've had him on here a number of times.
Right.
Okay. But Don, what do you think about that? Could that, the hypothesis I've been working with, war in space, apparently at one point came down here. Could it come down again? Avi Loeb suggested it could.
Yes.
And so did Brandenburg.
The biggest problem we're dealing with is, as you mentioned, your love of history. I grew up as a history buff. Most of my books, what people would think they're on UFOs, no, they're on history. And the very study of history gives you a perspective of the present that most don't have.
Right.
That we see where things are going. Because where we've been and where we are, we have a good outlook as to where we're going. And that's the problem. Whether we're dealing with the powers that be at the Pentagon, they're not historians. Politicians are in a perpetual campaign mode. They are the last ones to study history. And then with the dumbing down of society, the idea that all the people that are graduating from college right now who don't know as far as the very capital of their own state, and that these are the people that vote and they're going to call the shots. And that's where, Don, we always have to say such things, biting our tongues, because we realize the audience is probably going, my God, these guys, are talking. They're really out there. They're out in space themselves. Mm-hmm. But the point being, these are the things that have been speculated on for decades regarding the past 1,000, 5,000, 20,000 years as to what has transpired within our own neighborhood. And if we turn a blind eye to the past, we're not going to recognize what may be staring us right in the eyes today. And it's as good an explanation as any right now. When you have a situation that, like lambs to slaughter, why are we being set up for this right now?
Well, Don, we got to go to break. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at my clock. Chanel's going to slap me around.
My fault.
We'll pick. No, not at all. My fault. Mm-hmm. It's my fault. I'm the guy that called the shots. Yeah. Okay. We're going to be back after this, and we got more coming. So stick around.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling Birth of the Vampires in Romania. These small esoteric getaways are limited and do fill fast. So, go to mysteriousAdventuretours.com and book your trip soon.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Okay, we are back, and hey, I almost forgot. Got so tied up there in the in the conversation. We now have a call-in number. I'm sure you all are aware of it. Oh boy, I'm getting some feedback. But if you'd like to join the conversation, this is what you do. You can pick up that telephone or cell phone and you can call us at 855-472-5483. That's 855-472-5483. And you too can talk with my guest, Mr. Don Schmitt, or myself, Gary, or Mark. So, hey, don't be shy.
Hey, Don.
Hey, Mark.
Don with the fancy hair. So I've got an existential question, and it's kind of based around Hynek in the hospital, right?
Yes.
So I don't know how old Jerry Gary is, but it's basically probably Don Ecker on top, and then Donald Schmitt, who's just in his 70s, and then maybe me at 64, and then Jerry Gary. So hey, we're in the second half, right? So we've lost.
You're off. You're off, but go ahead.
Okay, well, that's what the internet said. Okay.
It does? Wow.
But it says a lot about you.
Yeah.
So we've lost Stanton Friedman. He never got the answer as far as, the gold-plated answer, let's say, that everybody would agree with. Video Dave Aaron, a friend of mine and a friend of the show, checked out. Mr. Robert O'Dean checked out. Didn't get his gold-plated answer. So as far as you guys and us being older guys and exposure and stuff, exclosure, not exposure, Jerry Gary, are you in a place in your research and studies and stuff that you can check out happy with what you know now, or would you still like a gold-plated situation where it's inexplicable and everybody's on board?
It's my father used to. He raised 6 sons. And he used to drill into us as a former Army drill sergeant, the idea that become successful enough, make enough money that it doesn't matter who's calling the shots. And it's been very wise. And I feel it certainly applies to the subject matter as well. I think too many people, they rely on outside sources to provide them with that level of success or accomplishment or even closure.
Don, we've got some distortion, and it's not just you. It sounds like all of us.
I'm not hearing it on my end at all.
Yeah, I'm not either. So she's going to reset.
I just got bounced out of the thing. I
don't know. I can see you.
You can?
Yeah.
Yeah. I never lost you.
Well, it's I'm looking at the startup screen.
Right.
Must be the secret government, I guess.
Yes. Well, but just continue.
I kind of think about that because of Holt did his supposed deathbed thing about Roswell and all that, right? So everybody's going to have their own kind of view on how to handle this. You seem to have a very clear and adult way to be able to go to your end in a more positive way than possibly like Hynek would, right? Why don't they tell me? Why don't they tell me, right?
Right. And what was so sad, getting back to even Hynek for a moment, whenever we would be with him in the field, he would constantly lament. He would constantly make the comment, I'm an old man in a hurry. I'm an old man in a hurry. And it was good for me to see that, because it was like, there's absolutely no way I want to ever become that way. that I ever feel that, and Hynek was in his late 60s at that time, and he was already, I'm in a hurry, that I still am unaccomplished. I still need to finish this, that type of thing. Well, as you mentioned, Hynek and Bob Dean and Stanton Friedman, and we can mention many others, they all left, they all ran out of time. And when Kevin Rando and I, we started our own independent Roswell investigation, it wasn't where we were taking away from William L. Moore or Stanton Friedman or anyone else at that time. We were going to set our own course. We both were skeptics, but we were going to allow the evidence to take us wherever it would. Okay. In tracking down all the eyewitnesses that we did, and to date we've interviewed over 600 first and second hand people either directly or indirectly involved. We've had now 6 archaeological digs at the site, still looking for remnants, still looking for the Holy Grail, as we call it. We are placing ourselves in charge of our own destinies. In other words, we're not going to rely on Washington. We're not going to even rely on a lone witness. We're going to make it happen, one or the other. And then if we come up short, it's not going to be where we failed as much as we ran out of time. It isn't where it wasn't there, that the brass ring wasn't still there at arm's length. We ran out of time. I think a lot of athletes, boxers, if it would have gone 30 more seconds, football teams, if we would have had one more game as far as the playoffs, that type of thing. And on and on and on. I think history is rife with examples of people who just didn't have the adequate amount of time necessary. It doesn't mean that they were unsuccessful. It doesn't mean that they just fell short in at times by a matter of seconds. And that's not a life. That's still a life well lived. It's still a life where, as long as in the race, as long as they were in pursuit of the truth.
Well, let's not forget, Don. Let's not forget the Giants.
Someone else to just plunk it down in front of them and then accept this as it is, whether you like it or not. No.
Donald Kehoe, Ivan Sanderson, Roscoe Hillenkotter, for God's sake, the first director of CIA, all
Don,
part
you broke
of
up
NICAP.
Quite a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Those guys poured their life into it.
No, yeah. And those names all came through. Absolutely. And there too. Pioneers. And so as we were even discussing earlier.
Go ahead.
I think we need Don to disconnect and maybe come back.
And then come back in because he's having connection issues.
It's not sound, it's just connection issues. So if Don can...
Well, I didn't want to interrupt earlier, and I just want to bring up the fact that, no, wrong Don. We met you, Don. We met you, Don. You were having connection issues.
Don, Don with the tie on.
Yeah.
We'll say something to Ecker.
Yes.
That's the problem when you've got a guest and a host with the same name. Mark and I meant the other Don with the tie, not you, Don. You were fine.
Yes, Don, you're perfect. Your hair is perfect. Everything's perfect, Don. It's the other Don. Should have said Don with the tie on. He needs to leave and come back in because he was getting a little choppy.
Oh, I thought it was me.
No.
And I thought it was Don because it was choppy. It was choppy on my end with him. Okay, how's it now?
Yeah, it's a little better, but it's still a little choppy. It just started within the last 10 minutes. But I wanted to go back to disclosure because I didn't want to interrupt because, man, you were just laying it out there, Mr. Schmitt. What I got to say, I'm saying Mr. Schmitt because we got two Dons in here, and I want to make sure you know which one I'm talking to. Don, you're a real piece of Schmitt, I'm telling you. But basically, with disclosure, one of the problems that we're seeing is that when the government said turn over your records to all the departments, what department refused to turn records over? Air Force. Because Air Force has the most to lose, because them and the CIA are going to look bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's just too much dirt under that rug, that if they lift that rug and people start seeing what they've done over the last 70 years, it's going to do damage. And there's no damage control for that. That is another reason why we will never see disclosure, because they are never going to turn everything over, period. Am I correct or wrong on that?
I could not agree. I couldn't agree more. In fact, the culpability, the manner by which the Air Force, the manner by which the Army Air Corps treated specifically civilians back in 1947 as a result of the Roswell incident is beyond disgraceful. And the fact that these families are still alive, the fact that the children of many of the people involved grew up with that level of fear and intimidation in their own country. I mean, this constant, we live in the freest, most, as far as open society in the world. Well, only by their terms, because whenever it's about to hit the fan, they're either declaring martial law and confining us within our own homes, or they're beating our doors down, arresting us because we just voted for the wrong person. I mean, welcome to United States, America, 2023. And the beginning of it, and I think a lot of it had to do, and Don, in your paper, I mean, you hit on it as well, with the passing of the National Security Act. For the first time.
Again, right after Roswell.
Immediately after Roswell. And for the first time, they could essentially cop out. They could plead the fifth, always under the guise of the national security, that no matter what the situation, all they had to do is wave the national security flag, and just like that, they were unapproachable, untouchable. But the other thing is, what the National Security Act also did, for the first time, it made all Americans suspect. We all became enemies of the state for the first time.
Well, the Patriot Act did that, Don. The Patriot Act 20 years ago.
Exactly. And that's where I'm also concerned, Don, that if we have an attack here within, the American homeland, that will just further solidify the Patriot Act, the idea that they will use it to take away what freedoms and rights and liberties we have left.
Look, right now, I don't give a damn, okay? The last 2.5 years, our borders have been wide open. Literally millions of who knows who have flooded into this country. And right now, today, the FBI is theorizing that we could very well be suffering terror attacks from Hamas operatives that are currently here in cells in various major cities. Now, that is something.
That the idea that the FBI Director Wray would now finally say, well, we may have a terrorist attack right here as far as on our mainland. It's like, duh. And you've had an open door policy for the last 3 years, and now we may face a possible threat. Okay.
It's reminiscent of the Benjamin Franklin quote, which I just put in the private chat, where he said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, precisely. And we had it with 9/11. We had it with the Patriot Act. We had it with COVID. And we're going to see it only get worse, I'm afraid.
Well, these were all exercises in control. They were all exercises in control.
And yet the same people that we see all this going down right before our eyes, And they're thinking that, well, UFO disclosure is still relevant. UFO disclosure is still on the docket. That Washington is going to put aside the possibility of a nuclear war, World War III, and let's get to the bottom of the UFO situation. I mean, you people, are you ever going to take your heads out of the sand? Well, it's because they have their own little podcasts and they have their own little minions that follow them, and they have to continue waving that flag as if it matters.
So there's a question I have. Look, you've been around a long time. I don't know how many conventions and things you still do. There really aren't that many as there used to, like the 90s. I mean, every month there was a convention around the country, and I went to a lot. That's where I met Don. And even though he doesn't remember it, but that's okay.
I do.
So,
and you were a smart ass back then, Mark. So go ahead. Right.
Absolutely. That's why I thought he'd remember me. Because hey, you smart ass Don, come on, man.
Yes, right.
That's right. So, when was the last time, and have you recently been accosted for your beliefs and things? You know how folks will do when because everybody's got a camera now, right? Everybody's got the camera, right. And of course, somebody like Calvin Carlton Korff, You live in his head rent-free. Don does. Lots of people do. He's a moron. I don't want to discuss him necessarily, but because of the internet, because of YouTube, because of cell phones, in the time period we're in now, do you experience anywhere near possibly the issues that you might have had at conferences with guys screaming at you or accosting you on the street or an hate email and stuff? Do you still get that?
No, and I think I'm big enough and I'm athletic enough that in any one of these cases, I tell them, say it to my face, bring it on, that type of thing. And not one of them ever has. I'm quick to point out two things. That, and this is what I would say to any one of them. If we're wrong, if we're collectively wrong about this subject, it doesn't change anything.
Absolutely.
But if you guys are wrong, if you guys who have been, as far as launching these nonstop salvos on us and the smear tactics and the character assassination, that you feel that your agenda is to demonstrate that something doesn't exist. If you're wrong, it changes everything.
Everything. Yes, it does.
Everything. And the other thing is, if you people feel you've won the day, you've won the war, it's over. You've explained it away. Case like the Air Force, the Roswell report, case closed. Why do you continue to engage us?
Exactly.
Why do you feel the need to continue the battle when and that's where Don and Mark too. You raised the question at the point that I feel it's mission accomplished because the investigation continues. It's still fluid. We're planning another archaeological dig. We're still tracking down family members because we're getting more and more deathbed testimonies. We've had judges, we've had lawyers tell us personally that we would win this hands down in any court of law. Okay, so I could walk away and say, mission accomplished. But these people can't. The Cal Korffs of the world, I love the fact I have free rent in his head. I don't give him the time of day. As far as I'm concerned, his opinion doesn't matter in the scope of anything, anyone's world except his own. And what a sad commentary. What a sad commentary. If that would be my life's accomplishment, that what I all said throughout the course of my 80 years on this planet amounted to nothing. Boy, what a wasted life. And I'm not about to give you a time of day, pal. Go ahead. Give it your best shot.
Hey, I just want to point out that Bill is in the chat on Facebook, and he's got a couple of questions. He says, Don is a straight-up guy. So grateful to meet him this past summer in Roswell. He does an outstanding job at the International UFO Museum and Research Center. But then he continues, Don, is there any chance that there will be a show or series based on all that incredible data stored at the UFO Museum? Bill.
We had talked earlier how Don and his wife Vicki were at the premiere of our Roswell movie at the Directors Guild. That was in 1994. We're talking, it's going to be 30 years next year. So we've accumulated a little bit more information. We've taken it, and the movie holds out wonderfully.
Absolutely.
I mean, Don would remember too. We were nominated Best Made for TV Movie Golden Globe Awards. And you want to talk about dedication and devotion. Kevin Randall and I, as the two writers and the book authors that the movie was based on, we were invited to the Golden Globe Awards. And that Sunday evening, we're sitting in the lobby of the Comfort Inn at the airport in Albuquerque, watching the ceremonies, looking at one another going, this is the stupidest thing we have ever done in our lives. But we will never have opportunity again. But we were on the case. We were in New Mexico working. That's how committed we were.
Don, did you know that film, Roswell, that you were in, you had a part in it. Kevin Randall was in it.
I had a cameo, right?
Yeah. Did you know that ended up uncovering another witness, another participant in the debris cleanup in 47?
That was Thomas Gonzalez.
Yes, it was.
Yes, who you interviewed.
I discovered him down in Roswell. I ended up. Well, yeah, Vicki and I flew down to Texas after. Well, there's a long story there. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but he had disappeared for a while, and then he was found. His sons got him back down to Texas. He had seen the promo for Paul David's film and thought his 509th Bomb Group was having a reunion. So he basically was living with a daughter then. They were not getting along. And one day he said, the hell with it. He packed a bag. He went out, jumped on a bus, and drove to Roswell. Well, at that time, there were 2 UFO museums in Roswell. Correct. And John Price had one. And we had stopped in there. I was with Dwight Schultz. We went in there and met this man. And I'll tell you what, that's a hell of a story. But the man would have never turned up. He was another witness. And he was somebody that told me that he personally witnessed 4 bodies, 3 of them deceased, 1 was still alive, that he claimed communicated with them utilizing telepathy. And Gonzalez called them the Moon Men. That was his name for them, the Moon Men. Right. So I don't know the synchronicity of that.
And what we loved was the fact that you and Vicki, you had that experience, that you got to speak to a firsthand. He's in this yearbook. You can document he was there in July of 1947 in the squadron he was assigned to, the rank. And you multiply that dozens and dozens of times. So that's why we're in New Mexico juxtaposed to being at the Golden Awards. because it creates that level of excitement, that level of enthusiasm. I mean, the hair practically stands up on the back of your neck when you talk to these people. And you can't help but ask yourself, what if they're telling me the truth? What if they are describing something that unearthly, something that extraordinary? And here I am, just feet away from them, and they were just feet away from the real thing. So there too, Mark, your question about, I think what Roswell has afforded Don and myself and others involved is that we have gotten one step away from the actual phenomenon. That in dealing with all of these eyewitnesses, it's closer than anyone just reporting a light in the sky. Now you see it, now you don't, that type of thing. Roswell still remains the granddaddy. It's the ultimate. And that's why, even getting back to Bill's question quickly, yes, there's been a strong push for a number of years now that because the Roswell story has become so big, so all-encompassing, that you can't contain it just in a feature, in a movie. It needs to be a TV series. It needs to be, as far as fleshed out to that extent, especially with all those witnesses. So we would love to see it happen. We've had all types of proposals and offers, but as you know, Don, Hollywood is so fickle that what is, what's Taylor Swift one day and the next day it's Madonna. So,
well, not to get crude, but years ago, okay.
Please do.
Okay, there's no way you're not going to get crude after saying that. Come on.
Years ago, when Dwight Schultz was appearing on several variations of Star Trek, I found it amazing.
That was after A-Team, yeah.
Yeah. I found it amazing. When I asked him, I said, well, how many of those folks think there might be something to the UFO topic? And he surprised me when he said very, very few of them, okay? They just don't give it any credence. And he said, but look, he said, if suddenly little brown bags of puppy poop would become the next big thing, they'd be out there selling it. So it doesn't matter what it is, okay? It really doesn't matter. Hollywood, per se, in mass, will basically prostitute themselves wherever they can make a buck, period. It doesn't matter whether it's good, bad, indifferent. They'll do it to make a buck.
Absolutely.
You couldn't be more accurate, Don. I think Gene Roddenberry, Tracy Torme, the screenwriter, he was contracted by Paramount to script the Fire in the Sky movie. And Roddenberry took him aside and chewed him out that how could you possibly, you'll never work in this city again if you get involved with this BS. And it's like, yeah, I've been making millions of dollars subject all these years. Isn't that, aren't you a bit of a hypocrite? And the same thing as I was doing a lot of sci-fi conventions, and whether it was George Takei, or Bill Shatner, and John Delancey, who played Q. I just had some communication with Delancey a few months ago about doing something again. And he shot back at me that, oh, your UFO garbage, isn't going anywhere. You guys have been beating a dead horse all these years, so why don't you leave it alone? I said, but you guys can't leave it alone because it's your bread and butter. It's because it's your career. It's what you have made money off of all these decades. But heaven help us for at least trying to get some answers. We're the foolish ones in their eyes.
Yep.
Well, those guys that have that kind of an attitude tell me right up front they have a closed mind. They have a mind that cannot encompass what the hell's going on around them. All right. Now, when you have naval aviators on a battle group encompassing these things, they get all kinds of data and they get all kinds of photographs, movies, etc. When you have when you have a special warfare vessel tracking one of these things from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean in a second or two, that should tell you that there's more to your universe, my friend, than your mind will allow you to see.
So you are absolutely correct. Yeah. And I finally figured it out even years ago when I started going to sci-fi conventions as a speaker, and the hostility, the level of caustic friction that I would sense by being there, and I finally realized I was encroaching on their territory. I was making their fiction into nonfiction, and they were threatened by that. And
that could be.
So it's a very narrow-minded, it's very closed-minded, but it's their house.
Harlan Ellison was another one.
Oh, I dealt with him as well. I dealt with him, and he didn't want to even discuss the subject. Didn't want to touch it. And yet we have like actor Roy Thinnis, who has become, with the iconic TV series The Invaders, and then he was a regular even on X-Files. He embraced the subject. I've been a dear friend with Roy for almost 40 years now, and he knows more about the history of UFOs than most people in the field, because, as I said, he realized that not only was he portraying a character who was trying to demonstrate to the world that there was an alien presence, that we were potentially being invaded, that they were here, the invaders were here. But how much of this may be reality?
I'm glad you mentioned Roy Thinnis, because in that series, and by the way, I have that series periodically.
Yeah, me too. I'm a big fan.
I love that series.
I do too.
The series was all about those entities down here on Earth. Okay.
Yes.
Now, Don, I've been around long enough that I've become pretty much convinced that might not be far off the mark.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are down here. I think, for whatever reason, God only knows why, that they're here. They're passing themselves off as human beings. I have no idea how many.
And certainly explain some of my exes.
Yeah. I have not said this a lot publicly, but I have said it in the past. What about you? Do you feel that they may be here walking among us?
When the series was canceled, it was one of the rumors that was circulating at that time that it was getting too close to the truth, that it was suggesting that the highest levels of government and institutions and education were all incrementally being infiltrated, that they were taking us over from inside. It wasn't where it was a full-scale invasion like War of the Worlds, but it was all being done psychologically, paranoidically, as far as that they were turning us against one another, that we would get to the point you wouldn't know who was an alien and who was an earthling, that type of thing. And so I would talk to Roy about that. And he would tell me that through the course of the series, he was getting hundreds of letters, even from people within the military, high-ranking officers, who were telling him, you don't realize how close this is to the real thing, that it's the one thing that we're investigating, it's the one thing that we're looking into, that type of thing. And so maybe back then already, they were wise to the situation. You're talking 67, 68 is when the series ran. But Blue Book still was operational at that time. We know the Air Force was still hot on the trail, so to speak, for whatever reason. But it may have been more of a case of the war was against us, not the invaders. The war was preventing us from finding out the truth. The war was preventing us from finding out just how incompetent our leaders were, because they allowed this to happen right under our noses. They lost control, and now it was to prevent us from becoming wise to it. And that's what Roy would suggest today, that what we're looking at is that the invasion has been taking place all these years, and now it's going into.
And what would one say to, there's a conflict, that's why a bunch of the saucers came down in the 40s, and after around the world, there's all this thing going on with possibly them here interacting and et cetera, et cetera. Why are they waiting? What are they waiting for?
Mm-hmm. Well,
right?
I guess I just would simply say our time reference, our time perspective is just different. A day to us may be an hour to them. Who can say?
Yeah.
So I guess we make the mistake of anytime we try to think alien, try to think of their motives, their agenda, that type of thing. I like what you wrote in the chat, Mark, as far as from the movie.
Yeah,
them,
because
right?
we can't see them unless we got the glasses on, right?
Glasses on, so, right. And I like to think, though two of us aren't wearing glasses tonight, the two who are, but nonetheless that we're willing to put them on and face the possibility that we are dealing with entities. We're dealing with, who is it? I'll think of it in a moment. But there are, futurists, and there are people even outside of the UFO community who suggest that we've been taken over, that we already are dealing with another race that is beyond just influencing, world events, but that they're actually
that's been David Jacobs.
Well, but then also David Icke, for example, who.
Well, I don't give a lot of credence to Icke.
No, but I don't either. I was just going to say I consider him really on the fringe, but he's another one who's outside the UFO community who's also making that same claim that there's an alien influence as to the present course of events. And with Dave Jacobs, it was his book, The Threat. The idea that with all the abductions, that there was the creation of a hybrid, that was the purpose, the creation of this hybrid race that would then, taking on more and more the appearance of human beings, infiltrate, that they would slowly, evolve into our very system.
So other than Roswell being an inexplicable event for you, obviously, do you have another one? I always like to bring up to the guests, my inexplicable one is Zamora case. It's just, the more I read about it, the more I look into it, I'm just like, I am blown away by that case. So that's my inexplicable case.
Yeah, a guy who never sought any attention. He didn't want anything from it, and he tried to shun it and move away from it and hide in the shadow. Shows that he was being honest.
And I don't know, Don, if you ever met or talked with Lonnie Zamora.
No.
I spoke with him on the phone a number of times. I met his wife, Mary. I've met his daughter. I've been to their home. I've been to the site many times.
Nice.
And Gary, you're absolutely correct. The idea that it drove him off the police force, because thereafter, whenever he would be in the courtroom and he would have to, and Don would remember this, that he would have to present his report, as to why so-and-so was brought up on charges or even for a traffic violation. And all they would have to bring up, we're going to listen to you, and you see, little green men from Mars, that type of thing. So they constantly made him a laughingstock in public. It ruined his career. It didn't drive him out.
It humiliated him.
It did. And the crazy thing with Lonnie Zamora, he thought this was a religious event. Immediately after he experienced this, he raced directly to his parish priest, thinking that he had just seen something demonic. He saw something that he shouldn't have. So everything about it smacked of something extraordinary. The fact that there were landing depressions, there were originally footprints from the two beings as far as in the soil. There were metal shavings on the stones where the landing gear had scraped as it touched down and lifted off. And there were outside witnesses who also witnessed it approach as it came down and as it also left the vicinity. So it's just
one thing, Don. One thing about that case that very few people have commented on were the hieroglyphic that was on the side of that craft.
The symbol on the side of the craft, right?
Yeah. And I saw, and
there are different versions.
Well, I read an article years ago that it was very similar to a very famous UFO case in Spain back, I think, in the 50s or 60s. All right. The indication was, or the implication was, were these from the same source or what, But very few people have mentioned that. Then I saw years ago in the 90s, a skeptic try to suggest that was actually a NASA prototype lunar lander.
The lunar escape module, correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With children.
Yeah. And at the time, and you know how they were testing it? They were using a crane. They were lowering it, back and forth. And so, what happened to the crane?
And then he missed all that.
How convenient. What's also interesting is that same night, and something else that is seldom reported in conjunction with Socorro, that very same evening in upstate New York, there was a farmer by the name of Gary Wilcox. He was working his field, and he saw what he thought was someone had abandoned a white freezer or something in a fence line, and somebody had dumped it there for him to dispose of, that type of thing. And as he got closer, he saw that it was egg-shaped, and he saw two white coverall beings standing outside the craft. And so it was almost an identical situation.
Were they small? The beings, were they tiny?
5 feet. He described them about 5 feet in height, but that's about the same height as what Zamora described. But then the very next night in La Madera, New Mexico, about 100 miles to the northeast, there was a similar sighting in that area. In fact, Hynek would tell Ted Phillips, when they went out after Blue Book, and Ted Phillips, who was famous for investigating physical trace cases, as you remember, Don, and he and Hynek went to Socorro, and they went to La Madera and tied the two together. And according to Ted, that Hynek was convinced it was the same craft. So another blow against lunar module nonsense, or that this was a college prank.
Right.
The fact that Hector Quintanilla, who Hynek referred to as a nasty officer, and he was a nasty officer, went out of his way not only to explain away every report that came across Blue Book's desk, but also to discredit the witnesses who would report them. He wanted to make sure that he was sending out a message. Don't even think about reporting such cases to the authorities. But Quintanilla described in his own book that he went out of his way. He did everything he could to try to explain away Socorro, and he could not. That it just, he had to finally acknowledge that something.
You cut out, Don. You cut out.
Oh. Am I back now?
Yes, yes. You want to repeat what you just said?
It was in regards to Hector Quintanilla. Did we get that in?
Yeah.
He was the last director of Project Blue Book.
Yeah.
And a nasty officer, and that in his own book, he described how he made every effort to try to explain away the Lonnie Zamora Socorro incident, and he failed. He could not. And so, and that's from a diehard debunker, someone who not only made every effort to explain away a report, but also to discredit the very witnesses. He was the one, for example. Go ahead.
I was going to say a classic case that I have always kept in the back of my mind is the Hillsdale case that J. Allen Hynek was so connected with.
Yeah.
Yes. And when those college students and others, including police officers, reported what they witnessed, and J. Allen went out there to examine it for Blue Book. I mean, this was one of the cases they rolled him out, and he suggested, well, you know, it's possible it could have been swamp gas. Well, what's swamp gas? Well, rotting vegetation, you know, and it gives off fluorescence. It turned Hynek into a laughingstock nationwide. Now, I always wondered if that was one of the major reasons Hynek ended up turning that corner.
It was a breaking point. And for the fact that you are correct, Don, the Air Force trotted him out to deal with a nationally publicized incident involving multiple independent witnesses, including police officers, including an Air Force officer who they never mentioned. And Hynek would describe that the moment he got off the plane, the press were grabbing him. They had engulfed him. They were demanding answers. Now, the Air Force has been, using you as a subterfuge, explaining away all these reports for years. How do you possibly explain away this situation? Now, Hynek would never live this down, but he would also explain that he merely suggested the swamp gas explanation for one specific sighting at that time involving a farmer who happened to have a marsh region on his property, and that the marsh would give off little orbs of gas, like a misty fog, and if it would reflect neighboring lights, it could tend to look like a glowing orb, depending on one's angle of a perception, that type of thing. But he would then always, I in no way tried to explain away all of the Hillsdale, all of the Dexter Ann Arbor sightings as swamp gas. It was only that one. But he got caught up in that. And he had hell to pay, not only from the media, but the public in general.
Oh, he had to be humiliated.
He never lived it down. Now, one thing I don't think you even know about, Don, is that Hynek spent an entire afternoon interviewing an Air Force officer, a captain who was a witness to the sightings. And the Air Force refused to release the report. They made sure it never saw the light of day. because they
No,
knew.
I didn't know about that. I didn't know.
Way beyond. It was one of their own. And they couldn't put that genie back in the bottle, so they buried it. So there again.
On a positive note with Hynek, he was in Close Encounters. Since you knew him, what was his kind of reaction, response? What his friends, what his family, or whatever said after they saw him in that scene, which was a great scene. I thought he did great for what. Yeah,
I still love it, and how appropriate. And then with the pipe, which was just a prop at that time, he had stopped smoking years before. But we had a dinner party at the Hynek residence right after he returned from filming that very scene. And so we're at his home in Evanston on Ridge Avenue there, and a good number of the people had retired to the main room, and I was in the kitchen with Alan. And I said to him, so I suppose, Alan, Close Encounters is now your favorite UFO movie? And he looks at me and he smiles and he goes, no, I'm still like you, Don. My favorite is still The Day the Earth Stood Still. It remained that for the rest of his life. And it's still mine. It's still mine.
Nice.
Well, I always kind of thought The Thing was my favorite.
It's right up there, too. It's right
for sci-fi, yeah.
Absolutely. It's like including the original as well as the 1982 remake, which is...
Oh, as far as The Thing. But not the remake of Day the Earth Stood Still. No.
Oh, no, that was terrible with Keanu.
Hey, don't badmouth Canoe. Don't badmouth my Canoe.
We're not. It's the script.
Great stuff.
Well, guys, we're getting down very close, believe it or not, to the end of the show. Don, took us months to get here. We only had a couple of hiccups, but I'll tell you, do you have any last words that you want to make sure you get out there?
Well, we had a website, but it got hacked. And now it's a Chinese gambling site. Nice. So you go to Roswell Investigator, and it's a Chinese gambling site. Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, my God. How did you get
it back? God.
I know. We only had it for 20 years. But I'm on Facebook under Donald Raymond Schmitt. And I do respond, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments in that regard. I monitor it on a daily basis. We have our wonderful museum in Roswell. In fact, we have a full-scale display of The Day the Earth Stood Still with a full-scale replica of the robot Gort taken from the original mold by Fred Barton, who's the robot artist in Hollywood.
Does it respond to Klaatu Barata Nikta?
No, but the music will cue and the head tips and the shield goes up and you see the glow of the light behind, and people do quickly move out of the way. So
plenty geeky there, Barry. It's plenty geeky.
Well, guys, we're down to literally seconds now.
Excellent
John,
show.
I want to thank you so much for hanging in there, buddy. I knew we'd do it sooner or later.
For you, Don, absolutely.
And I appreciate the heck out of it. Gary, Mark, as always, guys, thank you so very, very much. And hey, we'll
Barata Nikto.
Exactly. And if the good Lord is willing and the river don't rise, and we're still here in a week. Next week, my guest will be Mr. Stephen Bradford. I'll have more about that as the time moves along. But hey, that's it for tonight. Don Schmitt, thank you so much. Mark, Gary, thank you. And Chanel, as
Zoe,
always.
by the way. She's watching us right now, my daughter.
Oh, okay. Zoe. And as always, Chanel, you do a heck of a job. We'll see you next time, guys. Keep those eyes pointed up.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.